And just a note on that, in the next 13 minutes or so, 7:30, we're expecting the Health Minister, Joe Pahla, to hold a briefing to react then to the judgment today blocking Nehawu essential workers from participating further in that strike. What you were listening to, though, were remarks that he made earlier this morning while visiting the Tille Mokgwarane Hospital. That's on the East Rand. Let's talk further for now about the legalities around the Nehawu strike. We're joined by legal analyst Abigail Ngobene. A very good evening to you, Abigail. Thank you for your time. So, at issue, or what is still outstanding, is what government has been trying to draw the link between the strike and the deaths of at least 4 patients. Can such a link be easily drawn without physical contact between a protester or protesters and the deceased person?
Abigail, thank you very much and good evening to your viewers, and we are grateful that you have me today on the show. The issue of a link between the actual protesters and the government departments, in as far as the responsibility is concerned, which relates to the death, which the minister says there are possible deaths which could possibly be linked. It's not yet established on whether or not these particular deaths are as a direct result of the strike that we are talking about. But you'll remember that in issues like this, in an event that it is possible for it to be directly linked to the strike, the Labour Appeals Court today made a note when it made a judgment and said there was no law enforcement by the SAPs, and it has become a commonplace for SAPs to run away from scenes of crime, which of course they say, the court said, them running away from this kind of activities such as strikes which are associated with intimidation and barricading makes it impossible for a law and order to be maintained. And the court said they don't need to wait for the court order to direct them to maintain order in public spaces such as the health facilities. They have to do it automatically, and their failure to do that may also bring a liability on their side.
And I appreciate that we don't know yet the basis on which the health department is trying to draw the link between the deaths and the actions of the Nehawu protesters. Nehawu saying that its workers are basically being accused of things that they did not do. But would it be enough, for example, to say, because of the strike leading to a staff shortage, perhaps in a critical care unit, therefore the strike can be linked to the death of a patient who sadly passes during that period, or to say, because an ambulance or a vehicle carrying the person to the hospital was delayed at the entrance because of a blocked gate, therefore that means that the strike is linked or is a cause of death?
A lot of things, Abigail, that we may have to look at, particularly because there was a notice that was given to government with an intention to embark in this particular strike, and government was obliged to come up with contingency measures, other activities which may in the main be plans to mitigate the risk of irreparable harm that may be suffered in the midst of this particular kind of a strike. And you see, the other element that we may have to look at is what the court raised in the appeals court today, to say even the scope that was given in that particular notice from inception was so broad to an extent that it did not exclude essential services workers. And chances are the fact that they embarked on this particular strike while they were prohibited in law to embark in such may be a direct link to the death of these patients.
Could the families of the deceased hold the state accountable, i.e. police or even the health department, liable because of a failure to put in place sufficient measures to prevent the blockages of the last week?
Yes, there are role players to these particular issues, which I would like to identify and, of course, advise on, to say in the Labour Appeals Court judgment, which is an interdict delivered today, it says something very important, to say the union itself did not do anything to drastically ensure that their members in the essential services do not embark in this particular strike, because essential services workers are prohibited in terms of the law. That is one thing. But another thing, the union is also saying there are members or rather there are members of the public who were instituting or who were engaging in violent activities, who are not directly the members of Nehawu, but they said they are going to investigate and come up with findings that shows that these people were not part of the Nehawu, but they were members of the public. But you remember in law, whoever alleges must prove their allegation. And the last part to it would be the issue of SAPS. Why would SAPS wait for the court order for them to come and enforce law and order on those barricades, on those hindrances to enter into public facilities? So these role players may have to come and explain, and I'm alive to the issues that investigation may have to be conducted to check if, in as far as the Department of Health is concerned, the cause of death, it did not emanate from what we call the breach of a legal duty to care for patients. It's something that we may have to establish, but in the papers that families may have to institute, we'll have to look at these role players and cite them to come and explain themselves.
And who would be better suited to conduct the hearings? Would it be a court or perhaps a public hearing?
I suppose that, like in any other matter, Abigail, where there is a death and an unforeseen death that happens, then an inquest may have to be instituted and evidence be led for one to establish the cause of what could have happened in the process. And emanating from that, we will have an informed information, enough comprehensive evidence that we may, as a result, take to the court of law.
And ultimately, how does South Africa need to now better manage strikes to prevent especially what we've seen this week, where you've got members of a trade union who are striking? They say that they were not the only ones who were there at the picket line. They were joined by sympathetic people, perhaps, who may have taken, quote-unquote, their action too far. Who holds them accountable?
The right to strike is available. But the right to strike must not infringe the rights of other people. What we are seeing here, we are seeing an act of violence, intimidation. And it has appeared and it turned out in South Africa that we reasonably believe, or people believe, that violence is the better voice that can be used to articulate on issues of dispute, and which is not. I will appeal to the public to desist from such kind of activities. The better way of this is to have, we have seen in most of public institutions that the law enforcement agencies, there is army, there is police, there are metro police who are deployed in various places to ensure that those who need services and the workers who are not participating in the strike are not interrupted into their day and day activities.
And Abigail, just lastly, how do we test the theory that the people who, quote-unquote, misbehaved during these demonstrations were not in fact Nehawu members? Because I don't imagine that in all of the cases that the conduct would have been recorded on video. How do you then look at who was there, check their membership without an official record or even footage proving their presence at each of the demonstrations?
Very dynamic and interesting to see that, particularly because Nehawu is alleging that there are a lot of violences that have been taking place, but those people are not their members. But they are saying themselves that they are going to investigate and come up with the concrete findings on who was participating, who is not affiliated to them. But from where I'm sitting, it's going to be a very difficult exercise. But the law says he who alleges must prove. So because Nehawu is saying these are not our members, they may have to come up with a concrete finding as to how they differentiate their members as opposed to the members of the public.
Thank you very much. Abigail Ngobene, legal analyst, speaking to us tonight on News at Prime.